940-381-3695.
Taste your kiss, feel your touch, emotions running high, deep in the passion of love. Taste your kiss, feel your touch, emotions running high. I hear your voice, even when you're not here, telling me again we're made for each other.
Welcome back to our show. My name is Todd Ewing, and the name of our show is See the Heaven in Every Black Face. Let's see the heaven in every black face, transform ourselves, transform our communities, claim our nobility. Before we go on, I want to give a shout out to Reggie Gaskins for all he's doing to make this show possible and all the shows on eLife Media. So shout out, Reggie. Thank you for all you are doing. Again, the name of the show is See the Heaven in Every Black Face. Transform ourselves, transform our communities, claim our nobility. And I always remind people that I try to see the heaven in every face of people of all colors. But this show is about the transformation of the black community and what is being done in the black community to transform our community. Taken the show title taken from my book, Seeing Heaven in the Face of Black Men. If you're interested in hearing more about that book or learning about that book, website heaveninthefaceofblackmen.com. That's heaveninthefaceofblackmen.com. So this show and that book is about rewriting the negative narrative that exists in our society about black folks, and that too often subconsciously becomes a part of the narrative in our own heads, and it impacts the way we interact with each other. It impacts the way we treat each other. My thought is, as we start to see heaven in each other's face, then we start to treat each other in different ways, and we start to respond from our sense of nobility. It transforms the way we interact and the way we treat each other. So it really is a good place to be coming from a place of nobility. And that's what the goal of this show is, and therefore I try to interview people that are engaged in their own personal transformation as well as the transformation of the community, and this show is no different. We will have a couple other guests joining us in a few minutes, but this show is going to be about the racial tragedies that are taking place in our society. We all know what they are. We've experienced the killing of black men by the police. We've experienced the killing of police by black men. We've experienced Black Lives Matter. It's trying to rectify the situation, and then it's countered with a Blue Lives Matter. And all these things, first of all, the tragedies are terrible enough in themselves, and they evoke so many emotions in all of us. And then, of course, you have the aftermath, and you have the feelings that people are having to deal with about these tragedies. And so we want to talk about in this show, we want to talk to some parents, and we really want to talk to them about how they're addressing these challenges, first within themselves, but then how are they addressing them with their children. And we also want to invite some children on to ask them, how are they experiencing this? How are they seeing it? How are they dealing with the emotions that they have? And really just have a dialogue about this, because it's important. It's important how parents talk to their kids about this. It's important how kids are experiencing this and how they have a way to process it. And it's important for all of us to understand what our young people are thinking. So that's what this show will be about. You know, I've used this passage before, but the children are so important. I went back to it. I was looking at something that a dear friend of mine wrote. Her name is Dr. Joy DeGruy. And in the introduction of her book, she talked about the importance of children. And one of the things that she talked about was this, and many of you are familiar, probably don't know in detail about some of the most feared tribes of Africa are the Maasai warriors. And I think probably a lot of people have heard of the term Maasai warrior, but probably don't know maybe a lot about them. But as feared a tribe as they are, they're a tribe that cares very much about their children. And so when they meet each other, when they greet each other, they always ask each other, how are the children? And what Joy said Dr. DeGruy said in the beginning of her book, in the introduction to her book, she said, even warriors with no children of their own would answer that all the children are well-meaning, that all is well, and regardless of any other challenges, the children are being cared for. And Joy goes on to say, I wonder how it might affect our consciousness of our own children's welfare if in our culture we took to greeting each other with that same daily question. And the question is again, and how are the children? I wonder if we heard that question and passed it along to each other a dozen times, if it would begin to make a difference in the reality of how children are thought of or cared for in this country. I wonder if we could truly say, without hesitation, that children are well. Yes, all the children are well. So this is important, the importance of children, the importance of how we treat children, talk to children, how they are doing in our society. I think that captures it. And then there's another statement that I've also read on other shows, but I'll share part of it again. This is from the International Governing Body of the Baha'i Community, talking about children, and it says, children are our most precious. Children are the most precious treasure a community can possess, for in them are the promise and guarantee of the future. They bear the seeds of the character of future society, which is largely shaped by what adults constituting the community do or fail to do with respect to children. And then the statement goes on to say they are a trust no community can neglect with impunity. An all-embracing love of children, the manner of treating them, the quality of attention shown them, the spirit of adult behavior toward them. These are among the vital aspects of the requisite attitude toward children. And then it goes on finally and it says, an atmosphere needs to be maintained in which children feel they belong to the community and share in its purpose. So part of this program, and talking to the children, talking to parents about what's going on in the community, what are the racial tragedies, how they're responding to them. It's important to understand to help them understand they belong to the community, they're a part of the community, they help shape the community. So what they think, what they feel is very important. So a couple comments. I'm still waiting for a couple more guests. We've got one of our guests here, Satya Ewing Boyd, who I'll introduce formally in just a minute. We had two guests that were planning to come, Janelle and Adia, Janelle Gill, and her daughter. And unfortunately, Adia got sick, and her mother is doing what she really needs to be doing. She's home taking care of her. So really a shout out to Adia and Janelle, hoping they're both feeling better, and look forward to having them on the show, hopefully in the future. The guests that we will have on the show in just a minute, as they come in, will be Cameron D. Jones. And the way he wanted to be introduced is he said that he's married to Valeria King Jones, and they've been married for 14 years. He obviously has a career as well, but the way he wanted to be introduced is as being married for 14 years. He's a father, and this is particularly pertinent to what we're talking about. He's a father of 3 wonderful boys, and my son-in-law will be glad to hear this. He's also a Morehouse grad, a Morehouse man, and a Harvard grad, and he has a son that he's going to bring with him who's 11 years old. His name is Cameron E. Jones, and he's attended D.C. public charter schools. He's very competitive in chess, soccer, basketball player, and a basketball player as well. And so I also have with me to my left my granddaughter. I'm proud to have her as a granddaughter. My granddaughter, she's 13 years old. She's in the 9th grade. She loves karate, and she loves to wrestle, among many other things that she does. She's a vibrant soul, a very intelligent person. I look forward to interviewing her as a part of this show, and I think our other guests are here. They'll be coming in just momentarily. So I'm going to pause just a minute as they enter. I want to welcome Cameron and Cameron. If you'll take a seat here. Welcome to both of you. I actually gave you an introduction already.
Wonderful.
And so just find a spot and we'll be good. And we'll just kind of work with that, go back and forth with the, we got the mic here.
Yeah, y'all share.
We share the mic. Put it down just a little bit so your face, we want to see your face.
We want both of you guys to scoot up, scoot that way a little bit.
Okay, so scoot toward the mic.
Scoot that. Scoot down. Scoot down.
So in the blue shirt, this is the Cameron D. Jones that I talked about, and right next to him is his 11-year-old son, Cameron E. Jones. And I already mentioned that you are a Morehouse man, and that my son-in-laws would be glad to hear that, as you know. I mentioned what your son loves to do as a chess player, a soccer player, a basketball player. I also talked about the purpose of the show, really to talk about the racial tragedies that have taken place in our society. Kind of as parents, how are we dealing with this? How are we thinking about it? How are we processing it ourselves? What are we talking to our children about? How are they feeling about it? And so we really just want to have a conversation. And I already introduced my granddaughter, my middle granddaughter, Satya. So let's start out the show, which is the way that we always start out the show. That's see the heaven in every black face, and I make it clear again that I try to see the heaven in every face. But this show is about transforming the black community. So we're going to talk about what it means to see the heaven in every black face. And so I think a lot about our community, and I think about what happens in our community, and what would happen in our communities if we, when we looked at each other, we actually tried to see the heaven in each other's face. How would that change the way that we relate to each other? How would that change the way we treat each other? How would that change the way that we solve conflict? So I offer that question to anyone who would like to start with that, and I would appreciate hearing your answer.
Well, I think that the way to see heaven in every black face, that was the question, right?
Yeah, and how would that change how we interact with each other, how we treat each other, how we solve problems?
I think that it would change the way that we see each other and solve problems, in that people that have prejudices towards the black community, and even people within the black community, would start to respect and really expect to see the wonderful outcomes of their daily life. Like, we could have more powerful talks. We could talk to each other more powerfully. We could figure out how to help each other. And I know you talked about like the power of children. I'm not trying to say anything about me, but like I think that if the communities came together and started to see the heaven in each other's faces, then I think they could help raise the next generation better. Because, when people talk and exchange ideas, then beautiful things happen. And if there's a common goal, raising the children better, then I think that it would really just end very well for the world as a whole.
Absolutely. Thank you, Satya. Would anybody else like to tackle that? What it would mean to see the heaven in every black face, how it would change the way we interact, how it would change the way we solve problems?
Yeah, when I first heard the question, I think nobody walks around thinking of themselves as a stereotype.
Right.
So nobody thinks of themselves as a stereotype.
Right.
Yet often when we interact with others, we interact with the stereotype
Right.
that we have in our own head,
Right.
that we see,
Right.
that we've seen or heard before we even get to that person. So I think, and you and I have had short conversations about this, I think seeing the heaven is also, or I think of it as seeing yourself.
Yeah.
How would I like to be treated?
Mm-hmm.
How would I like to be spoken to,
Right.
greeted?
Mm-hmm.
And when I think and when we start to practice that, I think it rubs off on others.
Right.
But I think it's difficult to do. I think oftentimes we're in such a rush to
Right.
do so many things that we resort to the shortcut, which is the stereotypes and
Right.
not getting to know the person.
Right.
Because getting to know people takes time.
Right.
Getting to know yourself takes time. For someone to get to know you takes time. It's an investment.
Yeah.
But as Satya just very eloquently said, such beautiful things can happen
Right.
if you take that time.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to like everybody. One thing you're going to find out is you're probably not going to like everybody. But at least you're getting to know them as who they are.
Right.
And which is what you would want people to get to know you, as the individual,
Right.
as a black man, a father, a graduate of Morehouse, all those things, a brother, a son.
Right.
So I love the idea of it. I think
Well, why don't you do this? Why don't you do this?
helping us all get to that is
Right.
important. You have anything you'd like to say?
No,
Okay.
I think y'all covered it.
Okay.
Well, welcome, Cameron. You too, and we'll have a question for you in a minute, and we'll go to. I think the seeing heaven in every face is important. I think it's important on so many levels. I was talking to actually a white female yesterday, and we were in a meeting together. And before I left, she called me aside. And she said, I haven't read your book yet, Seeing Heaven in the Face of Black Men. She said, but now, when I see black men, I'm very conscious of looking for the heaven and seeing the heaven and realizing that there are other things in my mind besides that, and it's just helped me to transform how I see and how I interact and how I treat black men. The same thing you said about the stereotypes. She said it's taking away some of the stereotypes, and it made a huge difference in her life. So it is a very powerful image. So thanks for sharing that. I want to get into some more aspects of the program. We're living in challenging times. We know that. We know there's a lot of racial tension in our country. We've seen the videos on TV of the shootings of black men, which are very graphic. We've seen the shooting of several policemen since that time, which is, again, all this has ratcheted up the tension between the races, within race, between race. And then we are bombarded on the news with images constantly, and mostly negative images. And there are strong feelings about the police, but there are strong feelings about blacks being killed by the police, but also by each other. About police being killed by black folks. There are strong feelings when people compare the killing of black people by police and the killing of black people by each other. So that all creates tension. Just the kinds of comparisons create tension to add on to the tragedies, to add on to the things that are happening. There's a dismissal of charges versus Freddie Gray in Baltimore. All the charges dropped. There's tension when it looks like there's a clear indication that somebody was shot unjustly by the police, and yet they get off. That raises tension. That's happening. And then there's strong feelings about this whole counter to Black Lives Matter, that Blue Lives Matter. So there's a whole level of tension now around race in our society. And it's coming to us as parents, it's coming to us as grandparents, it's coming to the young people. And so it seemed to be important to have a conversation about this. And I read something from a psychologist, and he said that sometimes even if we don't experience things directly, we just see it on TV. He said the more people identify, personally identify with the victims, the more devastating it can be for them, and the more emotional difficulties can take place. So if the police identify with the police being shot, if blacks identify with the blacks being shot, it's not just happening to somebody out there. It's almost as if it's happening to us, and it creates another level of trauma. We can experience trauma through what happens to other people. It doesn't have to happen to us directly. So we need to talk about, what we're feeling about these things. And so I want to start with you. You're Cameron E.
D.
You're Cameron D.
D.
And this is Cameron E. Yes. So I want to start with Cameron E. And I want you to just share just like some of the, when you saw the videos of the shootings of the black men, and then you saw what happened with the police, and then the aftermath. What feelings and emotions have you had to try to work through with all this? Kind of how have you handled those emotions? But just primarily, what are the feelings and emotions you've had to work through as an adult, as a parent?
Yeah, I would say it's interesting you bring that up. So oftentimes it's, I'm driving along in my car or on TV, and, I have to shed a tear.
Yeah.
Because it's, to your point, it's close to home.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can relate to, identify with some of those victims.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also the son of a former federal magistrate, a law enforcement officer,
Mm-hmm.
a judge. And I've been around police officers and sheriff, as well as FBI agents for a good amount of my life. So I know that there are good officers out there.
Right.
I'm also a black man, and I've been stopped on the side of the road in Mississippi, driving between Little Rock and Atlanta, just myself in a car. And I know that you have to be careful who you come in contact with, even if they have a badge on.
Right.
But how do I think about it when I hear these things?
And feel.
How do I feel? Well, I feel disappointed.
Yeah.
I feel let down.
Yeah.
I feel disappointed because I believe that our law enforcement professionals that are trained and paid should be held to a higher level of accountability. You mentioned earlier that some people want to equate Black Lives Matter to Blue Lives Matter, and they want to point to a young man being killed by police unjustifiably, to police being killed. And in my opinion, those are not comparable. Where I'm from, in Little Rock, Arkansas, the police cars on the side of them say "to serve and protect."
Right.
And if you are a person of color, and when that car pulls up, and you do not feel that they are there to serve or protect, I think that's a problem.
Yeah. Could be in the back of your mind or the front of your mind, right?
Right. I think, and it's been widely shown on TV, the episode in, I think, Minnesota or Minneapolis.
Right.
And I always, in the back of my head, I just listened to how poised the young woman was in that car.
Yeah.
And I just think about how horrific an instance, an act just occurred within inches of her.
Right.
And she knew that in order to preserve her own life, and possibly that of her daughter,
Right.
she had to act as if that had not occurred and be very calm. That is unusual.
Right.
That's not natural.
Right.
It's actually not natural.
Right.
And then I listened to the voice of the officer,
Yeah.
and he's clearly distraught,
Right.
unhinged, and I think those roles should be reversed. The law enforcement professional should be the one calm, poised, de-escalating, whereas the civilian, who could easily, would be justifiably upset
Right.
by what's going on. So I look at a lot of these instances and I'm disappointed.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed in our justice system. I'm disappointed in police departments that do not hold members of their community accountable. I think there's a real problem there, and I'm not sure they understand yet. I went to Morehouse. I know what a fraternity feels like.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know what it feels like to walk down the street and you see somebody that has on maroon and gold, and you don't know them from Adam, but they're your brother, and you will do whatever you can for them.
Right.
But I also learned at Morehouse that we have to hold ourselves accountable. And if I see my Morehouse brother doing something that he shouldn't be doing, that's not in his best interest or others, that I have to correct him.
Well, that's I think that's powerful, and you said a lot. I want to give these young people a chance to share a little bit about their feelings and come back to. There's a couple of the points you made I want to come back to definitely, but just in terms of the emotions that if you can name an emotion or two that you've felt as you've heard about these kinds of things that have happened on the news that your dad talked about. What have you been feeling? What have you been thinking, Cameron?
Scared and disappointed. I feel kind of disappointed because a few of these were unjustified killings and they shouldn't really have been happening. Scared because, I'm a little black child. I've been out on my own at school and, just thinking about that this has happened to other people. There's not a high chance of it happening, but those people must have thought the same thing and it happened.
Right.
So yeah, it just makes me kind of unsettling that stuff like this happens. And yeah.
Do you ever worry that it could happen to your friends or ever somebody you know?
Yeah.
Do you ever have those thoughts? Yeah, those have to be a little bit hard to deal with, a little bit hard to wonder about. How about you, Satya? What kind of feelings and emotions have you had to work through and deal with?
Most recently, it was almost numbness when I found out. I was at camp. I was at sleepaway camp when someone came and told me that was not at the camp. You know, she came and visited and she told me. And she said that I can't tell any of the little kids and that I shouldn't, like, talk about it too much because, you know, you don't want to bring that into the camp. You really don't in a place where you have been protected from it.
Right.
It's almost like you don't want to think about it. But when she first told me, I didn't feel surprised. I didn't even feel sad, actually. I felt more like, and that happened again. And I was thinking about it later on when I was just sitting down on my bed. I was just thinking about it, and I was like, I'm really this used to it. This has happened so many times that instead of me feeling surprised that somebody was murdered,
Right.
that more than one person was murdered, instead I'm just feeling nothing almost. And once I realized that, then I did feel sad, but
Right.
I had to really face it in order to realize. And when I got home, it took me a couple of weeks to watch the video. Like, I kept putting it off. I'd be like, oh, I have to clean my room. My room was fine. I had to do homework. Oh, yeah, I had done it. Like, I kept putting it off, and finally I was like, I have to watch the video. Like, this is something that I know that I should do.
Right.
So I did, and it was like, I think the worst part was how much you see people you know in the people being killed.
Yeah.
And like he said, yeah, I do get scared that my friends are going to be the ones. Every time that it happens, I check almost. I don't know that name, do I? That's not somebody that I'm close to. I'm sitting in this room surrounded by you three, and I know that it could be anybody. It really could be anybody.
Right.
And it's scary, but also something that it's a scary that I deal with all the time.
Right.
It's not something that I can really be like, I'm scared of this, I have to sit down. No, it's something that I process and go about my day with. I almost don't have time to be scared. I don't have time to sit down and just sit there and process it. I have to process it while I do everything else because it happens so often and it's so tragic, but it's just so often that I don't really have the time to sit down and think about it whenever it's scary for me, you know?
No, I totally get what you're saying. I think we all carry that with us because there isn't time to process it, and it is so traumatic. And so that sits inside us, and it is traumatizing. I think that is the word. And when you carry that much emotion with you, then it puts you kind of on alert. And then there's a level of stress, I think, that we carry that we're not even aware of. And it's hard enough for adults, but as children to have to carry that level of stress, I think it's
Unfortunate.
it's very unfortunate. And then we have the shootings of these black men. And, back to back, one day, then the next day. And then we're dealing with that and trying to, I almost lost my mind when I first saw those videos, literally. I almost lost my mind from it. And then all of a sudden I hear 5 policemen get shot in Dallas. And then I hear 3 policemen get shot in Baton Rouge. And then you have to start dealing with those feelings. The mixed feelings around that. So, so you have the thing of having to deal with seeing black men shot, and then you have the feelings of dealing with seeing the police shot. How did you deal with that when that happened? How did that feel coming on the heels of? And there can be conflicting emotions, and I want people to be honest because this is the challenge.
I had a wide range of emotions when I saw what occurred in Dallas, and I have family that live in Dallas. I have really good friends. I actually had friends that were in that square in hotels that were locked down while that was taking place. I think, and I was scared. I was scared because I started thinking, all right, the police will, if the police feel that they are being targeted, that could be a very dangerous situation for black people in Dallas. Very dangerous situation. So, and I say that because the reason why I think many of these, not all of them, but some of these issues arrive, or some of these things occur, is you have law enforcement officers that are afraid, whether they should be or not.
Right.
They're afraid or they're mad.
Right.
So seeing, a number of their fellow cops shot down that way, I knew would make them afraid and mad.
Right.
And the easiest target are going to be, people that look like me and my son,
Right.
And you.
Right.
So I was actually quite afraid for my friends and my family that were in Dallas at that time. Quite afraid.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know you all heard about that too. I mean, you had to experience that a few days after, shortly after the killing of the two, Mr. Castillo and Mr. Sterling. What what thoughts went through your mind? What feelings? Can you name the feelings or thoughts you had during that time? Either one of you.
Scared again, because if a trained officer who has weapons of self-defense and offense on him can get shot down, it means it would be a lot easier for a child like myself get shot down. And I also felt kind of bad because, well, no one really likes hearing that someone's dead.
Right.
And it's just a lot because it's happening more often.
Right.
And it's just, it's just unsettling.
That is. Unsettling's a powerful word. Very unsettling. How about you?
My reaction to the officers being shot was, like he said, scared for the black community, especially when we live in Dallas or in Texas, because while I do feel very badly for the officers and their families, because I know they had families, and I know that this is in no way their fault, that their deaths has and probably had an impact on people living there that are in the black community. Their fear must have increased. Like, they must have felt like they have to almost not go out
Right.
in order to feel safe. And then also the Blue Lives Matter, like that, it kind of that irritated me in a way. Not because I don't think that police officers shouldn't feel victimized, but because they chose to be officers, but black people don't choose to be black. When officers take off their uniform, there's no way to know that they're officers unless they tell you. But black people can't stop being black when the workday's over. They don't have that choice. We can't take off the badge. We can't quit our jobs, quit being black in order to feel safe.
Yeah.
We don't have that option.
Yeah.
And then the fact that a bill got passed so quickly that the problem got dealt with so easily compared to the decades, centuries of trauma black people have been feeling, and the very few times comparatively it has been dealt with by our justice system. And again, I feel terribly for the families,
Right.
but their feelings, other police officers' feelings, are feelings that black people deal with on a day-to-day basis, and feelings that the black community has been dealing with for centuries, like I said.
Right.
And it's almost, it's just irritating because they have had such a positive reaction, and we don't get that no matter how many times we say it's happening, no matter how many times you see it happening, read it happening in history books, in the newspaper, online. Like, no matter how many times it's brought up, it isn't dealt with. And so I think that while, again, I feel bad, so that's one of the, it's definitely there. It's definitely something that I feel. I also feel irritation and fear, like they said.
You know, and this is what I think challenges us. I mean, we get ripped apart emotionally. I want to show my humanity. I want to show, which I do care. I mean, I was devastated when I heard that, and then I have these conflicting feelings because I know, again, that black people don't get the same treatment. So I want to, on the one hand, feel the grief and just feel the pain and feel what I need to be feeling about anybody being killed. But there's that other part of me that's saying, yeah, but, you know, see what's happening now, see what kind of, somebody said it this way, I almost don't even want to say this, but they said black people are the only people that are put on trial for being murdered. And I thought, whoa, that is a powerful statement. It's like, okay, you know, they actually are on trial almost for, did they deserve it? You know, all these sorts of things happen. And it's, yeah, so it's a very challenging thing. And I think what happens is we go, and one of the things we do, most of us do, is we talk to people. And sometimes that conversation can be helpful, sometimes not so helpful. And I'm just wondering from you, Cameron, you, Satya, you know, have you had conversations with your friends about these kinds of things, and you know, what kinds of things are they saying? What kinds of things are they talking about?
I've talked to them about like not like showing out on the way, because we used to, from my school, we would walk to this little convenience store to get snacks, and like they would be like hooping and hollering and yelling, and it kind of like it draws attention to naturally not a very nice, not an area where everything goes right all the time.
Right.
So it's not the safest place, and they're just drawing all this attention, hooping, hollering, and this is a bunch of black kids. There's like 4 or 5 black kids just hooping and hollering away from school with no adult supervision, and it's kind of like, and sometimes I'm there, so we, like, I've done it too, so I'm not going to throw them under the bus. I've done it too, but it just kind of scared me, the fact that we could do it, draw a little too much attention, and something really bad could happen to us. And the fact that we could just be silent and just walking there, and because we're black, we could get in trouble. Like, we wouldn't do anything, and we could get in trouble.
So kind of a conversation about watching how you behave, watching what you do, and that sort of thing.
Yes.
How about you? What kind of conversations have you had with your friends?
The conversations that I've had with my black friends are, in a way, sometimes we kind of joke about it, because sometimes that's the only way that we can deal with it without crying. So sometimes there are kind of jokes made about it, but there's, of course, we're serious. Like, low key, we're really serious about it, but we have to almost put on an air of humor in order to not break down in tears. But we also talk about, you know, I've had conversations with some of my black friends about being well behaved. Like he said, being more well behaved in public, not just to protect ourselves, but also to prove people wrong. They might expect us to act a certain way, so watch me not. Watch me talk the way that you don't expect me to talk. Watch me do these things that you don't expect me to do. Yes, you're being rude. I hear your microaggressions. I see your microaggressions, and I'm going to respond to it politely. And then the conversations that I had with some of my white friends were actually, I was actually kind of proud, because, like I said, I went to a sleepaway camp, and that is expensive. So it's usually rich white kids. So I go there with Just Imagine. It's something that helps us get to camp for free. But some conversations I've had, I left immediately because I don't want to get myself in trouble. But then other ones, I was proud. I was really proud of my friends for recognizing the tragedy, recognizing the prejudice, and talking about it and starting the conversation.
Right.
Satya, how can I do better? What am I doing that is rude? How can I help other people? Is there any way that I should stand up for you because you can't stand up for yourself in this instance? And while it's not as often as the conversations I have with black friends, it happened enough for me to feel comforted in a way. The fact that they were there to listen and to ask questions and to learn about it was something that I was like, there's chance.
There's hope.
Like there's I know that something can happen that's better. So yeah, I think those are the conversations that I've had with my friends.
It gives hope when it matters.
Yeah.
I mean, when it matters and people want to know, and I think you said the key thing, they listen. They want to listen. They want to learn. I think that's very powerful. You know, there's, I'll come back to you, Cameron. Cameron, well, it's not Cameron Sr., it's Cameron D. You know, I read in doing the research on this and just looking at what parents are saying to their children. It's, you know, one parent in Baton Rouge, a mother said, "I don't want to create an atmosphere of fear, even though we as parents are so afraid. I don't want to create an atmosphere of fear, even though we as parents are so afraid." She's talking about in talking to her children about this. And so, you know, I'm wondering, really, as a parent, thinking about having a conversation. You have 3 boys.
Yes.
And thinking about having a conversation with your boys about what's going on. How do you decide what it is you want to talk about, what it is you want to share, what you don't? You know, how do you decide if they should watch the videos or not watch the videos? I mean, what kinds of things do you think about in having a conversation with your kids?
You know, I think that's a great question. I first want to give a shout out to my other 2, Cooper, who's 8, and Coleman, who is 6.
Right.
And mom, and this is my oldest wonderful son, Cameron, who's 11. One of the most important things that we do as parents is we create an environment for our children, and we curate it. You know, and
when you say curate it, you mean
we control it.
Okay.
We control the inputs. We control what they're exposed to. This is good. You know, obviously Satya has had a lot of very positive influences. And then you have to also, as well as Cameron, but then you also have to be very honest with yourself and prepare your child for the world that they're walking into.
Right.
So I'm going to take one step back. Satya made a really good point. So she was optimistic and encouraged, made her feel good about the fact that there could be change, right? That warmed my heart. I actually believe that we are getting better. I think the media spotlight on these issues has forced the very uncomfortable conversations that have to happen before anything can get better.
Right.
So my belief is we have to prepare our children, and sending our kids out into a world that they're not prepared for is doing them a disservice. So I think a lot about when to expose my sons to it. So I may have a conversation with Cameron in the car that his brothers may not be privy to. As we were driving over here, we might have a conversation about, you know, how he and his friends behave, or how they should behave if they're stopped by a policeman walking to the corner store.
Okay.
It's a very real scenario.
So at 11 years old, that's a conversation you feel
Absolutely.
like you have to have. Yeah.
Absolutely, you got to have that.
Right.
Riding your bicycle in the neighborhood. He's now at the age where where he can walk to the basketball court and ride the neighborhood without supervision. So what happens if you're pulled over by the security guard? We happen to live in an area where there's a security service. So what happens if the security guard pulls you over and, you know, has a question for you? You know, how do you behave? What do you do? That's, in my opinion, that's preparing them for the world that we live in.
Right.
I don't think I think it's a disservice if you don't. You know, you mentioned how much do you talk about without scaring them? I think it depends on the child.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the child, and I think that good parents will curate their child's environment based on their child. Some children are more ready for it earlier than others.
Right.
Some children are not.
Right.
So you have to just have to be tuned in as a parent.
Yeah.
I personally think once you're out riding your bike out on the street by yourself, you need to know.
Right.
You know, I was 12 years old, riding my bicycle around the neighborhood, and police officers might stop us and say, "Hey, someone just threw a rock through someone's window. You guys come over here." All right, now you need to actually utilize some of those skills that you may have talked about with your parents.
Wow. And how do you balance? I mean, you know, one of the things that I think is challenging is, okay, so you have these conflicting things happening in society, and how do you you know, it's a tough thing to balance. Okay, so all these black folks we're seeing on TV being shot, right? On the one hand, you see things that seem clearly like
No fault of their own.
No fault of their own, right?
Police were just out of line.
Right. And then you hear that, well, we have to wait for, you know, the investigation, right? And then a part of you...
We should never jump to a conclusion.
Never jump to a conclusion.
Don't jump to conclusions.
Right. And
the
there's...
video may not have been what you thought it was.
Well, exactly. And the truth of the matter is, sometimes that's the case. Sometimes it's not the case, right? And so how do you balance, like, trying to help your children respect the process of law, at the same time when law has not served us well, but yet we want to respect it.
Yeah.
And also the whole thing of balancing that, you know, we know that there are some policemen that do awful things, and yet we also know that the policemen that are mentoring children in schools, the policemen that are on the beat talking to children on the sidewalk, the police that are volunteering their time, we're never going to see that on TV.
Right.
And so how do we balance that discussion with our kids so that that we're not being naive? You know, it's a tough question. You know, I'm having a tough time even answering, but how do we balance all these things out so that and then our own prejudices, right? We have our own prejudices, how we not spew those over into our children. That's a that's a lot of stuff. So however you feel like responding to that.
Well, I'll start with, so when it comes to, I'm sure you've heard the phrase, you gotta tell, someone has to tell Pharaoh.
Yeah.
Right? You gotta tell Pharaoh the truth.
Right.
Our justice system does not work equally for black people as it does for white people.
Right.
Anybody who says that it does is wrong. Either they are knowingly wrong or they're ignorant. Either they're lying to you or they are just ignorant.
Right.
And this comes from a son of a federal magistrate.
Right. I understand.
Okay? The reason why my father became a federal magistrate was because the justice system was treating certain segments of our society unfairly. He chose to join that justice system and fight from within. He may not have had that opportunity to fight from within had it not been for someone fighting from without. Okay? So today we have to continue to apply pressure. We have to continue to call it out when we see it. We shouldn't shirk from it. It is uncomfortable to have those conversations, and unfortunately, I don't wish on any teenager at summer camp. But as adults, it's our responsibility.
Right.
It is our responsibility, so we can't shirk from that. But I also know that there are, and so that's addressing the real issue, but we have to be, honest about how broad the issue is. Is it every police officer? Most certainly not. Most certainly not. I actually find it odd that a lot of these issues, that a lot of these killings have not occurred in major inner cities. You know, we've had a few in inner cities,
Right.
right? That we're aware of.
Right.
That were called, like we had Chicago, we had New York. But I think it really is about being balanced. When we make the argument, when we call it as we see it, just being very honest. And, you know, I hate to say this, but I think you have to, when you're making this argument, when we're making this argument, we have to be objective. You know, I think the passion helps. When you are a victim of it yourself, I think that passion can reach a number of people. But if the audience you're trying to reach, you know, doesn't relate to you, the passion doesn't do anything. Right.
Just exactly.
So if the audience you're trying to reach, whether it's law enforcement or some group of people that you're trying to win over to your side, don't relate to you, passion probably isn't going to get you there. It's going to have to be that objective argument, which is, what would have happened if you were in this situation? You know, if we both watched this video, what do you think would have occurred? All right. I don't know if that's a strong enough argument either, but I think that the objective argument has to lead the way.
Well, I think so. Even when we talk to our kids, I mean, I think, you know, I don't think we can talk without passion because because we feel it, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, I think trying not to, you know, I don't want my own energy to go into them. I want them to experience what they experience, and I want to help them with what they experience, and not project all the feelings, all my own prejudices that they may not have onto them. And I think as adults, there's a responsibility to be in touch with where we're at, be in touch with what we're projecting, and answer their questions as objectively as we can, as factually as we can, with what I call passionate objectivity, because we cannot be robotic about this, because that would send a different kind of message that I think we wouldn't want to send. But in terms of how you guys feel, what conversations help you address this? What kind of things do you like are important for parents or adults or parents or adults to have with you? What helps you?
One of the conversations that I've had with my dad is like that not all people are like this. What you see on TV is only some people. That's not all people, so you shouldn't treat all people like that, like them, because everyone's unique, everyone's different. But we've also had some talks like when you're like addressing a police officer, yes ma'am, yes sir, no ma'am, and just like keep your hands out of your pockets, just don't move around a lot, just
That's helpful.
Yeah,
to know. What kind of conversations help you, and to deal with your emotions too, you know, just to deal with the feelings you have as well?
I think that in our family, there's a very strong there's this idea of independent investigation of the truth, which comes through the Baha'i faith. So because of that, instead of them telling me what I have to know, they usually let me research it on my own. Because I have an older sister, I can talk to her about what I research, and when I feel comfortable, then I can go talk to mom and dad. And I've had many conversations with them about everything that's going on, about how to deal with it, how to talk to people about it. And I think when I come with what I know and I talk to them about what I know, then they can respond with what they know, which is much more. They've lived longer and had more experiences than me. And they can let me know where I'm right and let me know where I'm mistaken, or let me know where I should improve. But they also do teach me to not be as rude don't be like not to be rude to a white police officer because you're irritated with him, because that doesn't send off a great message. And not everybody is the same.
Right.
So I think that because in our family we're often expected to do our own research, that the conversations that we usually have are very, are very educated. And I think those are probably the best ones because they prepare me to have educated conversations with people my age.
Right.
Sometimes people that are older than me, sometimes people that are younger than me.
Right.
So I think those are probably the best conversations.
Right.
Yeah.
So in all this, we've just got a few minutes left, but in all this, I mean, sadly, oftentimes it takes tragedy for progress to take place. It's almost like sometimes things have to hurt, and hurt more for progress to take place. But I think the tragedy is I don't want to say the bigger tragedy, but a big tragedy is if somehow we don't create opportunity out of what's taking place, that we don't change things. And so what do you see as hopeful out there? What do you see as opportunities for change that can take place as a result of this, as a result of these tragedies? And anybody can respond to that.
Yes, I was sitting here literally thinking, I wanted to ask you that question. If you thought that if you saw a light at the end of this tunnel. I agree with you. I think that, given what we've been able to see on social media and what's been going on the news, that there has to be something positive to come from this.
Right.
But I think what's missing is a proper way to have that discussion. You mentioned having an informed discussion with your parents. I am convinced, or I believe, that the majority of us in America aren't comfortable enough to have this kind of discussion. And the theme of the show is heaven in the face. You can say heaven in the face of everyone.
Right.
Even that white officer that approaches you at the car, or you need to deal with them as an individual. I truly believe that until many white people in America can address what we call white privilege. The fact that one of your friends at camp acknowledges that there's something she can do to better your situation means that she's also acknowledging her situation is better than yours. Right?
Yeah.
And whether she knew it or not. So acknowledging that white privilege, maybe lending it to Black Lives Matter or to some organization, or maybe just in the workplace when you see something, or in the grocery store when you see something going on that is inappropriate. But I really think that we were actually listening to a show. My father and I were listening to a show yesterday about Rwanda, about, going off on a wild tangent, about how they legislated change from the top down in their government. They legislated that 30% of their parliament had to be women, versus the women's liberation movement here in the States, which was ground up. What's the impact of that?
Right. That's the difference, right?
So, what's the impact of something being legislated here versus something that comes from the ground up, from the people?
Right.
Saying this has to change.
And I think you need a little bit of both, right? I mean, you need some of both. I want to just say this. Did you want to say something about that, where you see opportunities? Because I don't want to not give you an up. I think, a friend of mine's on social media a lot. She's my business partner. She's white. Her husband is white. And one of the things that they're saying that they're seeing more than they've seen in the past, and these people have been committed to this issue for, I tell the story, they went on the road for 15 years in an RV, traveling around the country to 47 states, meeting anybody and everybody to discuss racial healing and racial justice. So they made a commitment to this, and what they're saying is they're seeing more white people being more willing to engage in these conversations than they ever have before in ways that are much more substantive than before. I think also the thing that we're all going to have to tap is however we view spirituality, because our emotions, in my view, have been hijacked over this issue, and they're so raw that if we don't tap something more deeply spiritual in us, it allows us to transform and transcend and kind of take higher ground. Any kind of reconciliation, any kind of unity, any kind of justice is not going to happen. So I think that's the piece we've all got to tap. It's 7 o'clock. You know, the time went fast. Cameron and Satya, thank you very much. We could go on about this. I want to thank you all for it's a difficult subject. It's a difficult topic, but it's important. It's an important discussion to have. I want to thank everybody who's listening. And remember, transform yourselves, transform your communities, claim your nobility. We'll see you next week, and thanks a lot.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.